Hello everyone, my name is Susie Lytle, and one of the questions I get asked all the time is, where are the animals? The forest preserves are a little bit different in zoos because our animals take care of themselves and roam around freely. That doesn't mean you're not going to be able to see any, you just need to know where to look and how to look. We'll be meeting up with our wildlife ecologist to learn how she monitors all of our wildlife. Plus, we're going to be learning about waterfowl and the best places to scope out a spot to see them at Four Rivers Environmental Education Center. So tap into your wild side on this episode of The Buzz. There are many different jobs and departments here at the Forest Preserve District of Will County that all work together to make our preserves the best that they can be. In the past, we've met up with interpretive naturalists and program coordinators whose goal is to educate and connect the public about all the wonders that nature can bring. We also peeked into our restoration crews who work so hard to keep our habitats healthy and strong. And today, we get another piece of the puzzle by meeting up with our wildlife ecologist. Becky Blankenship is responsible for monitoring wildlife and gains insight on their population, their movements, and their overall health. Thank you, Becky, for joining us. I'm so excited to learn about the wildlife in all of our preserves. So let's start off with the main question. Why do we monitor?
We monitor wildlife in order to make sure we know what's on our properties in order to create management plans for them. We incorporate specific species into our habitat restoration goals, such as spotted salamanders. They migrate during the spring, and we want to make sure that we don't do prescribed burns during their migration times. Knowing which species we need to manage for helps us create better environments and ecosystems for those species. It also helps to know if our populations are healthy, and we can determine if they're on a decline by consistently monitoring, such as monitoring at Lake Renwick. We're looking for bird population numbers such as the black-crowned night heron to see if it's still nesting and what numbers it's nesting in. If their numbers are on decline, then we know that perhaps we need to adjust our management plans.
So what kind of animals do we monitor, and do they have particular seasons that we look for them?
Yeah, so we have the rookery surveys that we do twice a year during the nesting season. We also check cover boards for snakes and other reptiles and amphibians that may be hiding out under them. I check those once a month during the warm season.
Okay.
And then we also do deer surveys during the winter when there's snow on the ground. And we've been doing that since 1993. We also monitor for frogs, dragonflies, and butterflies through our volunteer monitoring program, and that's really cool because it gets the general public involved in our monitoring.
So you mentioned working with other people to help monitor. So can you talk more about the volunteers and the partnerships you formed to handle this big task?
We have a wonderful volunteer program through the Chicago Academy of Sciences where our volunteers can sign up to monitor a calling frog survey, a dragonfly survey, or a butterfly survey. And they get to select a route that they monitor 3 to 6 times a year depending on which species. And then that data gets entered online, and the respective monitoring network gets to analyze that data, and we can request it and look at the trends within our sites. We collaborate with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources on multiple projects, including our electrofishing program that we use to survey our lakes. Electrofishing is done from a boat that has electrodes in the water. These electrodes send out an electric pulse that shocks and stuns fish in order for people on the front of the boat to scoop up with nets. Those fish are then measured and possibly sampled if we're looking for contaminant levels. We also use this data to monitor our population health and the age and species distributions within the lakes. The Illinois Natural History Survey is another group that we work with. We hire them to do a lot of surveys within our preserves, including herp surveys, which are your reptiles and amphibians, and also your endangered and threatened species. So they've worked on researching our spotted turtles, Blanding's turtles, and our Kirtland snakes populations. Kirtland snakes are state-threatened small water snakes that live in crayfish burrows, and the Illinois Natural History Survey does a lot of research trying to monitor their populations here in Will County. So when they find a Kirtland snake, they measure it and pit tag it so that if they find it again, they know it's the same individual and they can track its health and growth. Because Kirtlands are state-threatened, it's important to keep track of their populations to make sure that we are helping them and not hurting them. The trail cameras are used to monitor species that are not typically seen when out and about during the day. So, like the bobcats. You don't typically come across a bobcat when you're hiking in the woods, but the trail camera is a way to monitor for species that are not scared by a trail camera. You'll get deer a lot of times that are very curious about it and they'll sniff it. Then you can also see species like coyotes and potentially foxes.
Does any of this disturb their normal behaviors? I see you're all decked out in camo, so they don't see you. Right. But are we doing anything that's gonna manipulate how they act normally?
Deer will be curious, bobcats will be curious, and they might sniff the camera, but it's not negatively impacting their daily routines. It's not startling them, it's not hurting them. Mm-hmm. Occasionally I'll clear brush away from in front of the trail camera to make sure that I get good pictures, but that's it. Right now I have 4 trail cameras out, and I try to check them every couple of weeks, but they can last a few months before I have to check them to make sure their battery is not dead. I like to see a few hundred photos is a good round of photos for a trail camera. Occasionally I'll get 1,000 photos for a deer head bedded down in front of my camera. And occasionally I'll get skunked and not get very many photos at all. All depends on placement, time of year, and how often I'm checking them. I like to put my trail cameras along game trails, that way I have a higher chance of seeing something passing by. I don't like to put them perpendicular because then you're only getting the side view, whereas if you put it facing the trail, you have the animal walking up to the camera. I also enjoy putting my cameras facing logs because logs are natural highways for a lot of animals like squirrels, and it increases the odds of seeing something. The bobcats by far. That adorable little family coming in front of my cameras for a couple of weeks. I got photos of them. Especially the daytime photos were incredible. Because nighttime it's really cool, but seeing a colored photo of a bobcat is just incredible. Occasionally I will get an owl or a black squirrel, or I will see something that you don't know is in the preserve yet, so I get to add that to our species list. So DuPage County actually came to us to release Hines emerald dragonflies at Lockport Prairie because that habitat is suitable for that species. We have a lot of preserves that have the correct habitat for specific endangered and threatened species that a lot of other places just don't have.
Thank you, Becky, for showing us how cool a wildlife ecologist's job really is. Monitoring wildlife is extremely essential to keep our ecosystem strong. You've heard me say before, and I'm going to say it again, everything in nature is connected. From the seeds to the trees, to the mice to the owls, everything has a niche or a job to perform in order for nature to run smoothly. Now, if you want to experience nature in a new way, try out monitoring for yourself. There's tons of online citizen scientist projects that are asking the public to record and observe different things around you, like birds to trees, really anything and everything. Plus, check out our Will County Wildlife Facebook page to see what locals are seeing in their neck of the woods.
Isle Alakash Museum and Preserve is a spot where the history of French voyagers and Native Americans meets modern-day Romeoville. There's no shortage of things to do and see, whether you love history, nature, or both. Hike the trail along the Des Plaines River and soak in some peaceful moments. Explore the museum, where you'll be able to step back in time and see what life was like hundreds of years ago. Say hello to our resident Blandings turtles and learn about why they are a state endangered species. Come to one of our longhouse living programs or a trader's cabin open house to see relics of the past. Before you know it, our pollinator garden will be bursting with colors, and our new picnic shelter will be booming with activity. So map your next adventure at reconnectwithnature.org and plan your next visit. We hope to see you soon.
March is a time where we're transitioning into the spring season, and one of my favorite things to do in spring is to watch the forest floor transform with emerging flowers. And the first plant to break the ground is not a flower that you would think of. This one is small, warm, and smelly, and goes by the name of skunk cabbage. Skunk cabbage sends up its flower before any of its leaves, and it's not a flower with petals. Instead, it has something called a spathe that's like a protective hood that protects the spadix. And the spadix is where all the little tiny flowers are produced that holds the pollen. The spathe can be different colors. It can be all maroon or maroon with specks of yellow. What's amazing about this plant is that it can produce its own heat, which melts the ground around it. This is called thermogenesis. It uses oxygen to break down stored sugar in the root, and that's what produces the heat. This heat can last for about a week or two, having the plant being at 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. After it emerges and gets established, then it will stop generating all this warmth. This flower attracts the first insects of spring, like flies and gnats. As you can imagine with the name skunk, it doesn't have such a pleasant smell. Let's give it a whiff. Oh yeah, if you've ever smelled like a dead skunk smell, that's what you get with our skunk cabbage. But this is perfect because the insects it's trying to attract love the smell of decaying meat. Skunk cabbage, like other spring wildflowers, is considered an ephemeral plant, which means it's only around for a short period of time. Come late spring and summer, this area transforms with huge, big green leaves. Once it's been pollinated, then the flower turns into like a berry fruit that has lots of seeds to grow the next generation. You can find this plant in wet areas, so look for along streams, springs, and even mucky soil in the woods. Have you been daydreaming of faraway destinations? Well, if you're going to travel, chances are you have to plan out your route. You have to look for the best highways with pit stops to fuel up and get snacks. Birds have to do the same thing, except their highways are waterways. We're here at Four Rivers Environmental Education Center in Shanahan, where the four waterways meet, making a great pit stop for the birds. These birds include waterfowl like ducks, geese, swans, and different aquatic birds. We're going to get deeper into IDing those different species later in the segment. But first, we're going to meet up with Jessica Mccloud, an interpretive naturalist here, who's going to tell us more about the best spots to see the most birds. So Jessica, thank you for having us here at Four Rivers Environmental Education Center in Shanahan. So what makes this place so special with all of its waterways?
So we are Four Rivers for a reason. We are where four different rivers meet. Right behind me is the DuPage River, and it meets up with the Des Plaines, which is our really big river. And then down south, the Kankakee will meet up with the Des Plaines, and they'll become the Illinois River. So having all of those different bodies so close together is really special. But they're also different kinds. So the DuPage is a really small river, so we get a lot of different wildlife there. Right behind me is the Confluence, and that is where two rivers meet. So anytime any two rivers meet, it's a confluence. Ours is really special because while the rivers are a little deeper, our confluence acts like a lake. It's really shallow and it's really protected by some of the islands that are out there with trees. So we get a lot of birds that land there that might not otherwise come to a big river. And on the Des Plaines, we'll get some of the bigger birds. Our pelicans come there that might not come to a smaller river like the DuPage.
Are there certain birds that are here all year round on the water versus ones that migrate in?
So because we are on the water, we get a lot of birds that come just for the winter, just for migration season, or just for the summer. And so the only birds that we really have year round are the Canada geese, mallards, mute swans, and then like 1 or 2 great blue herons. And that's it. Those are the only ones that stay year round. Everybody else is only here for a season or 2.
Short period of time.
Yeah. So because of that, we have constantly changing views of who is here. So those are the only ones that are always here. But in the winter, we get all of these birds that are from way far north. And then in the summertime, we'll have some that nest here, like wood ducks nest here. And so they'll be here soon, or they might be here now. We just haven't seen them yet. But we get all of these new birds constantly moving in. So it's literally a different view every time you're out here.
So you never know what you're going to get. You should come here at all different kinds of seasons.
Exactly.
So what kind of equipment should we bring if we're hoping to see the most birds?
So if you're just out and you're walking and you're going either farther distances, I would just bring binoculars. Mine are 8x42s, which is pretty much your standard binocular strength. There are 10x50s. Those are for a little further out. They're way more expensive. So,
And that's the magnification.
sorry, yeah, that's how far you can see with them. And that, so 8x42 is a great place to start. If it's a windy day, a scope like this is going to be kind of challenging, but you can see a lot farther. And where we are, the water goes out so far that having a scope is pretty handy. And then also a bird field guide. So if you don't use your phone while you're birding, it's really handy to have one. They make some that are specific to Illinois or to the eastern coast or all of North America.
You brought us to one of your favorite spots here. Why is it your favorite and what makes it special?
So we are down in the Confluence, which is where the DuPage and the Des Plaines rivers meet. And the reason that this is my favorite spot is because we're so close to the water. You're getting all of those water birds, but we also are in the trees right now, so we're getting songbirds. So we have marshy conditions nearby, so we're getting wood ducks and red-winged blackbirds, and we even have eagles going by over the river and into our trees. So we are kind of getting everybody, and with all these islands behind us, we get kingfishers coming through. Really, this spot, you have everybody.
We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to learn more about our waterfowl friends. Waterfowl is a group of birds that includes ducks, swans, and geese. Next, we're going to break down this group to get to know them a little bit better. Ducks are a common sight in the preserves and even our own yards. They all have webbed feet built for swimming and waterproof feathers that keep them warm. They are omnivores, eating both seeds and plants, plus insects, fish, and crustaceans like crayfish. Now, how they eat is what helps us separate the species of ducks. Some dabble while others dive. Dabbling ducks eat on the land, the surface of the water, and by dipping their heads down below. You may see them in the water with their necks stretched out and their bills scanning the surface. This catches any insects are on top, plus plants and algae that are floating. They also feed by something called tipping, which is when they send their tail feathers to the sky and their necks and beaks are underwater. When they do this, they're digging along the ground and also along the plants for a meal. One of the most famous dabblers are mallards. These are the bright green-headed duck that can be found in any freshwater habitat. I've even seen them in ditches along my neighborhood. Other dabblers include gadwells, northern shovelers, and blue-winged teals. Diving ducks are built differently than our dabblers. They have larger feet on shorter legs, put further back on their bodies, which are heavier, making all of this a little awkward to walk on land. They also prefer larger and deeper water bodies. Now, before they dive, first they squeeze their feathers close to their body, letting out all the air to help with buoyancy. And then they surge down looking for a meal below. Once underwater, they can use their heads and tails to steer, following fish for a good meal. A frequent diver we see is the common Mergancer. These are sea ducks, and they have bigger bodies with longer bills. Males are bright white with a green head, where the females are more rusty with a spiked crest. Now these birds love diving for fish, and when they're down there, they can stay from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And often when one goes down, the whole group follows. We have 3 swans in North America, and all 3 have been spotted here at Four Rivers at one time or another. Now they all look kind of similar, with big white bodies and long necks. But the more you learn about them, the easier it is to ID. First up is a mute swan. These are the most common and are here all year round. They tend to travel in pairs and are that classic silhouette that you picture when you think of a swan. So they've got those long necks that curve around almost like a little heart shape if they're together. Now be careful, even though they may look beautiful, they're pretty aggressive when defending their territory. Trumpeter swans are here during the winter months and may stick around a little longer. They travel in family groups, about 3 to 6 birds. They are the largest of the swans, with black bills and black on their faces that form a V on their foreheads. And because they're the largest, they actually need 100 yards of a runway to take off. And lastly, we have the Tundra Swans. They migrate through our area, so you'll be pretty lucky to see one. And if you do see them, chances are you're not just seeing one, you're seeing a whole flock of 20 or more birds. Now they're the smallest of the swans, but they look pretty similar to the trumpeters. The key is looking at their faces. Instead of that V on their face, their black is straight across their forehead. And then some birds have a little yellow dot right in front of their eyes. They're also called whistling swans because when they fly, their wings make a whistle sound. We've covered ducks, swans, and there's one more bird that we have to mention, and you're probably going to have strong feelings about, the Canada goose. Love them or hate them, they're very common in our preserves and on our waterways. You can probably picture them flying in V formation, honking along the way. Soon they'll be building nests on the ground where the females lay on the eggs for the long haul. Meanwhile, the male guards the nest and her. Come spring and summer, they eat mostly grasses and vegetation. Come fall and winter, they switch to berries and seeds. Now this is important because I see a lot of people feeding our geese and our ducks bread and crackers. And we want to mention that maybe the intentions were good, but this is not a great habit for the ducks. Having an improper diet leads to different health concerns. Bread and crackers are high in carbs, low in protein, so they don't provide the right nutrients that the ducks would get in their normal diet. One of the more serious problems we see with an improper diet is a wing deformity. It really impacts the birds where they can't fly. So we want to remind you that it's actually illegal to feed any kind of wildlife in the forest preserves. Our best recommendation is to enjoy the animals doing their natural behaviors from afar. Trust us, these animals know what they're doing and they know what to eat. March is the time where animals wake up or fly back into town. Thank you, Jessica, for showing us around Four Rivers Environmental Education Center for all the best spots to see our ducks, geese, and swans. Now remember, waterfowl comes in different shapes and sizes. Some prefer to be on top of the water, while others like to dive down. And pack your binoculars. Keep looking at the skies, the trees, the ground. You just never know what you're going to see here. With April approaching, so many more birds are going to be flying in. Look out for American coots, wood ducks, pied-billed grebes, pelicans, and so much more.
Birding is a great way to experience wildlife, even if it's just here for a pit stop.
From ducks to deer to even sneaky bobcats, Will County is full of wild diversity. So where are all those animals? They're all around us. Gotta try to stay quiet, look for tracks, keep your ears open for birds, and your eyes peeled for a chance to have a glimpse of our wild neighbors. Now it's your turn. Map your next adventure at reconnectwithnature.org for the latest in wildlife news, trail maps, and upcoming programs near you. I hope to see you out with binoculars in hand, but until then, I'll see you next time on The Buzz.